I'm Benjamin Hall, and I'm searching for heroes. Well, thank you very much for joining us, everybody. And today we have a guest who has gone through what I think might be one of the worst things to go through, and that is she had a genetic condition called the Stargardt disease that caused her legal blindness. And it happened very quickly for her. And she went from having an incredible corporate job to suddenly losing her job, losing her confidence, losing her identity, losing her vision, and then managed to find a way through and pull through. And she has become a writer, and she talks to me about all of those today. So thank you very much for joining us. And, well, I hope you enjoy this episode. Well, Tarris, look, thank you so much for joining me today. What a great pleasure to have you on.
Thank you for having me, Ben. I appreciate it.
Tarris, when I was reading up about you and reading about your story, I had to think that losing one's sight, has happened to you, is probably one of the things that, and I've got injuries, and I was injured in Ukraine and whatnot, but I thought that losing one's sight, I was thinking, could be perhaps one of the worst. And I just wonder what that was like for you. It happened, suddenly, you suddenly knew that was happening. Talk to me about what that process was like.
Okay. Well, it first started after I had my son. I noticed that I was seeing wavy lines and some distortion in my vision. And so I first went to the doctor, of course, to see what was going on. And I remember that first doctor told me that they couldn't wave a magic wand and make me be able to see, believe it or not. And so, of course, even though I still had some vision and my vision was intact, I was starting to feel a little defeated at that time because I knew something was going on. And so, of course, I went to a different doctor. And that's when I was diagnosed with Stargardt's. And what that disease does is it impacts your central vision, but your peripheral stays intact. So what was happening was I was starting to see blind spots from my central vision, things that I was looking directly at was starting to disappear right before my eyes. And
would that mean that you just, if you sort of turn your head to one side and you look out of the corner, you can continue to see things?
That is correct. That is correct. So that is exactly correct. So I could kind of look up or down or try to find a sight of vision through my peripheral, but whatever I'm looking directly at goes into a blind spot.
Do you find that when you talk to people, do you have to look away from them so you can see them out of the corner of your eyes, or do you just look straight at them even though you can't perhaps see their head?
That is a great question. No one has ever asked me that before, and that is exactly true. So what I have learned to do, and I don't know why I do this, but for the most part, I look directly into my blind spot. Yeah. And so when I do that, the person's head is completely gone. And that what was freaking me out when I was starting to lose my vision, because I knew that a person had a head, right? But it was like I was looking at, especially when I'm looking in a crowd, it's a crowd of headless people. And so it was very scary at first, to be honest. I mean, when I returned to work, that was the first time I had my first panic attack, because I went away to when I woke up, as you said, I lost my total central vision suddenly. I woke up and looked at my phone and couldn't read my text messages. And so I took some time off to get some occupational therapy to be able to use devices and to be able to look through these new eyes that I had, right? And I returned to work with devices and big giant screens and accommodations and things like that. And so when I went to do a presentation in front of a room full of people, I looked out for the first time and no one had a head. And so I ran out, because it totally freaked me out, to be honest with you. And so, yes, that was definitely...
it's just something that we must all take. We all do take for granted until you lose it.
Absolutely.
And it's such a key part of our whole experience in living is seeing. And I wonder, you must have felt a fair amount of fear when you've learned about this. And I just wonder what that does to you mentally. Like, how tough was that as a personal experience?
Yes. And so when I first lost, It was what Stargardt is a progressive disease, right? And so I did slowly start to lose my vision. However, I woke up, which is very rare, and I couldn't read my text messages. So usually it doesn't happen that way where it's that
It
sudden.
happened immediately, just out of the blue. Suddenly it went.
I,
What a scary moment.
right. So what happened was that little speck that was in that central vision disappeared. And so when that little speck disappeared, so did my central vision. And so that's what happened. And so, as you said, I was definitely very scared. But of course, at this time, I had better and good, actually great doctors. And so I was preparing myself mentally that this day would in fact come where I would lose my vision. But when I woke up and realized it, it was really like a dream. I didn't even believe it was happening, although it was happening to me. Returning back to work was also very scary because this was, when I left, I was able to see when I came back, I had all these different devices that I was trying to maneuver through life with. And so I ended up leaving my corporate job, and with losing my vision, losing my corporate job, I had a death in the family. I just went through a season of loss. I would say that all of those things together took me down into a state of depression, which I ended up on the bathroom floor. And that's when my life began to change. Is when I was down there and I didn't recognize myself. I didn't know what my future was going to look like. It felt like a dead end at that time. But I did hear a voice say, get up. It was God telling me to get up. And when I did, I looked in the mirror. As I said, I didn't recognize myself, but I made a promise. And I said, God, if you tell me what to do, I will not get on that floor, and I will help as many people as I can to not get on the floor as well. And then I heard write a book. And that's when my writing journey started.
More of our conversation right after this. Isn't it amazing that you can, in that one instance, and I suppose is it true that when you are, maybe it happens when you're at your lowest, when you got nowhere else to go.
Absolutely.
And then it came, God came to you then and there.
Absolutely. Because there's nothing lower than the floor than underground, to be honest. And so I was at that point physically, mentally, I was starting to get there. It was a very, very awful place. I don't wish it on anyone.
Were you thinking of taking your own life?
Well, I would say not taking my own life, but just feeling like my life was over, that maybe I've done everything that I was supposed to have done. I had those type of thoughts. And that's when I heard get up. And so I did get up, in fact, and thank God I did. And then I've dedicated my life to inspiring others, to empowering others, to really just letting them know that if you will hit a roadblock, or you may hit a roadblock on your journey through life, but it's not a dead end. It's simply an opportunity to pivot. And that is what I was able to do with my life.
And that is the strength. This whole podcast is about trying to find that strength, try to help other people, maybe try and find that strength to do that, because you can go in two directions. You can say, I can't do this, and you give up. Or you say, I do have it in me. I'm going to get this together. I'm going to find a way of doing it. And for you, and I know you heard God there, but there must be something personal there as well. Where did your resilience come from?
My resilience comes from my faith. It also comes from my family. I have 2 small children. I'm married. And when I was on the floor, I remember hearing my children playing when I got up, and I could hear their innocence. And that is something else that fuels me in order to keep moving, is my children. And so, when I was down there, I will say everything was tuned out for a second, but then when I was able to get up, I was able to hear it and hear. And as we talked about losing, vision. Well, what I noticed was that what was key for me is my other senses. So I hear things differently. I smell things differently. I'm present in a different state, in a different place, which enables me to really be a better artist, I feel, because I'm able to sense things a little differently, and things that I did take for granted. Like when I go on walks now, I smell the air, I, touch things. I may reach down, touch the grass, and, just really be in the moment. And that was something that I took for granted before.
Yeah. It's fascinating, isn't it? That maybe, until that was switched on and you had to rely on those other senses, you weren't using enough of them. And I think all of us, I don't think I'm using those other senses enough. And maybe it would be interesting to try and learn how to feel them a bit more. How old were your children when you first found out that you were losing your sight?
When I first found out, I hadn't had my daughter yet, and my son was 1 at that time.
I was wondering how you talk to them about this,
That's a great question. Yeah. So my daughter knows no different because I was already legally blind. And so I taught her how to read with my magnifier, with my device. And so it's been phenomenal for them. I'm mom, right? My son, I use him a lot. And even now I call him my eyes. I call my daughter my vision, because, I'll say, what does that say? Read that for mommy, or, and they're so used to it. But my daughter actually helped bring me out the closet with using my devices, because when she was a little girl, I remember when she was sitting on my lap, and I told you I taught her how to read with my magnifier, and we were at a party with a bunch of other moms, and they were reading to their daughters and children. And so a mother handed her a book. And so she handed it to me and then put her head on my shoulder and was waiting for me to read. And I was too embarrassed at that time to really go into my purse to bring out my magnification device. And so I just started talking to her, and she looked at me like I was crazy, like, you know how to read this. And she just reached over me, grabbed my magnifier out of my purse and said, "Mommy, light," because there's a light on my magnifier. And so that's what she called it, was light. And so I said, you know what? From this point on, I want her to see me in my full self, living my full life. And I wanted her to know that mommy, has legal blindness. She can't see, but she can see with these things that help her or help me get through this life and to live a quote unquote normal life. And so that was inspired me. So definitely my children, I love them dearly, and I thank them for that.
Yeah, I feel that as well. And I remember, because when I got my prosthetic legs, my kids were 6, 4, and 2. And the only fear I had was that how would it affect their lives? I could handle the rest of it. And wow, does it give you strength when they sit side by side with you and it means nothing to them. I'm exactly the same person.
You are Dad.
At that moment when I realized that, I was like, this is like the fear that I had has gone.
And, exactly. It is just life-changing, right? Because when she said, "Mommy, light," and then put her head on my shoulder, I was like, and I just started reading to her, and I said that's it. So that's right.
But you've turned your life around in so many ways. You've become a writer as well. And I wondered if you could tell us a bit about Blaque Pearle, but also I want to know how you just suddenly found the inspiration to be a writer, which you'd never considered before. Where did that come from?
Well, I would say that I went to Florida A&M University my freshman year on a journalism scholarship, believe it or not. Okay. But at that time, I was taking it for granted. And to be honest with you, I come from humble beginnings. And at that time, journalists and in the journalism field didn't make much money. And so I was very scared of what my future would look like. So I made a pivot to become a business major, because I went to a symposium and they presented to us how much each major made graduating from college. And at that time, journalism was towards the bottom. And then it showed 5 years later that there's a big bump in pay. But at that time, I was just concentrated on how much am I going to make as soon as I get out of college. So I guess I would say, to answer your question, that bug was always inside of me. That artistic bug, that love for the arts came from my grandparents. They loved musicals, so I grew up with that. But as I became older and I started thinking about my career path and what that was going to look like, then I pivoted into another passion of mine, which is fashion. So I went into the fashion industry. I started off as an assistant buyer. And so I was able to live that dream job that I had in through fashion. And so to answer your question, I guess the bug was always there, like that love for writing was there. It just hadn't quite hit me until I was on the floor and then I heard write a book. And so, but when I sat down then, I didn't know what I was doing. I just looked at this huge screen. My screen is big. And I was just looking at the blank sheet of paper, like the blank page, and was like, okay, so what do I write about? And that's when these characters started speaking to me and I just started writing it down.
Wow. I totally feel you about journalism. I remember when I started off, I was a freelancer and certainly tough to make ends meet. And I remember that I was about to have my first daughter. And I said to my wife, I said, I don't think I'm going to stop being a journalist because I can't provide for my daughter anymore. And amazingly, a few months before she was born, Fox asked me in, said they'd been watching, would I like a job? And I mean, I was literally weeks away from saying, that's it, I can't afford to keep going. And so I totally know what that was like. Where was it those words, write a book, that you specifically heard those three words?
I did.
Why do you think, looking at your faith, why do you think God would have picked those words? Why would he have told you to write a book?
I think that one, that I was going back to my roots and my passion for the arts. I think it led me there, and that was a place that I was always supposed to go, and I just didn't realize it. I think that was one reason. I think that writing, as you know, being a journalist and putting your stories out there is very important to your legacy, to the world. And I wanted to be able to do something and be in a position that even if you don't read my book, that you will hear my story and hear what I've been through and and the journey that I continue to go on. And hopefully I can touch someone's life. So it was important to me when I did get up that before I heard write a book, that the one thing that I wanted to do was to make sure that I could be in a position to inspire and empower others. And so I think there's something to be said about what write a book did for me, because it has allowed me to get on platforms, to be able to tell my story. Thank you, Ben. And to hopefully be able to touch someone's life.
So perhaps try to send a message of resilience, a message of strength to people who need it. And I suppose I would next ask you, for someone who is listening, who say is having a difficult time, where, like you were, on the floor, what is the message from your own experience that you would give to them to encourage them to get up, to keep going forward? What is that?
As long as you are breathing, you still have work to do on this earth. And do not ever look at a roadblock as a dead end. It is simply an opportunity to pivot. That is truly what it's about. Is in this world, we're going to hit things that feel like it's the end, but it's really just an opportunity. As they say, one door closes, another one opens, for you to then move into something different. So just hold on, get up, and then watch your life change.
Yeah, sure, exactly. I wonder, Tarris, if you could tell us a little bit about your book, first of all.
Yes. So Blaque Pearle is a crime novel. It is about Pearle, who is an aspiring actress, who then is hit by life and then decides to pivot. And she actually becomes a criminal, and she robs men of their valuables, and then she's hired by the cartel to steal a art piece worth millions from an art collector / kingpin named Blaque. So it's also a love story, and it is a journey of love and crime.
Sounds like there could be a movie in that as well.
I hope so.
I suppose, Tarris, just to finish up, from everything you've gone through the ups and the downs, is there a message that you'd like to send that you feel is strong, something from your experience that you want to leave us with?
I would say that love conquers all. As Ben and I have both said today, at the end of the day, we were focused on how that's our life impacts others, our children, and for whoever that is for you, your faith. Just know that this life continues, and just stay strong in your journey, and that never hit a dead end, but just simply look as these roadblocks as an opportunity to pivot.
Perfect. Tarris, what a great pleasure to meet you. Thank you so much for coming on today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you
anyone
for
can
having
find
me.
of course, and anyone can find your book on the internet. Just have a look for Tarris Marie, Blaque Pearle. Thanks so much, Tarris.
Thank you so much.
We'll be back in a moment with Searching for Heroes. Well, I was thinking leading into that interview about blindness in general. And as I was saying when I was speaking to Tarris, I think that blindness is one of the things that probably makes me the most afraid. I lost the sight. I got shrapnel in one eye. And, despite having lost, my feet and legs and the thumb and all these things, it was making sure that I continue to have vision in my second eye that was probably the most important part for me in my recovery. Because I do think that if you take away everything we can see, it takes away much of your world. And so that's why I was so fascinated to speak with Tarris today. And I think that listening to her, the one thing we would take away from that I would take away from that, is that we might often take for granted some of the things that we have, not just our sight, but our hearing and our smells and all the other abilities we have. And sometimes it's perhaps important just to realize how lucky we are, how lucky you all are to have those, and just appreciate that. And perhaps that means that some of the small things that we worry about, they should just disappear. And I suppose the other thing that we hear time and time again in these podcasts, it is about community. Can't do this without community. Can't get through anything tough without community. And as in many cases, and as with Tarris, it's about faith as well. So thank you so much, everyone. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and look at something beautiful. Touch something. Smell something. Just appreciate how lucky we are to have those senses. Thanks, everyone. Listen ad-free with a Fox News Podcasts Plus subscription on Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Prime members can listen to this show ad-free on the Amazon Music app.